ADvTECH Academic Head of Schools and Schools Division, and Hopolang Selebalo, who's from Equal Education. To both of you, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
All right, let me start with you, John, because your school's got their results, and it's become an expectation, isn't it, to get such high and good results, 98%. And what it suggests is that private school education has got things right, I guess.
I think, look, as a group of ADvTECH schools, we've done a little bit better. We've got a 100% pass rate across all of our schools.
Wow.
So we're really proud of that. And to attribute its success is really about how we support our teachers and how we treat our teachers. We treat them as educators, we treat them as professionals, and we give them the support they need to excel with our children.
All right, so just before we came on air, I was looking at these results and I was just saying, we've got an equal distribution of children and intelligence across the country. Why is it that there's almost 100% chance you'll get through Matric if you go to a private school?
We teach in four walls, most schools. I know some schools, but largely we all teach. We have a champion in the classroom with four walls around us. It's all about that champion. We've got resources, we've got a whole lot of facilities, but at the end of the day, it is that individual who makes the difference in that child's life.
All right, so there are differences, there are disparities, and we're going to hear that a little bit later on about the public school system. And this is where Equal Education has stepped in. Remind us again what you do, and when you hear the results later this evening, what will be in your mind and what you'll be listening to?
So Equal Education is a social movement that has about 5,000 learners as its members. We advocate for improved quality education within the basic education system, particularly within the public sector. Our biggest campaign has been on school infrastructure, but we also have campaigns that talk to safety, which is a big issue in provinces such as Gauteng and the Western Cape. Basically, we're fighting to ensure that there's a conducive learning environment for learners to learn and for teachers to be able to teach. And we strongly believe in the rights of teachers and support of teachers to execute their mandate.
Right. So the difference between the private school results and the result that we're going to hear later this evening sometimes can be as much as 20-25%. What do you attribute that difference to?
Firstly, I'd just like to say that there are some high-performing public schools. In fact, unfortunately, these disparities exist within the public school system as well.
And that's the quintiles 1 through to 5.
1 through to 5. So you'll find that no fee-paying schools, 1 to 3, often struggle and produce lower results than 4 and 5, which are fee-paying schools. And this is mainly dependent on resources, as has been mentioned, and historic backlogs as well, particularly for those schools in rural provinces. Teaching plays a significant role. So in fee-paying schools, you get additional support through SGB posts because those teachers can be paid, whereas teachers in quintiles 1 to 3 have to deal with overcrowded classes. So the conditions in which they have to teach in are untenable, and they're expected to produce excellent results. So it's about improving the system to ensure that teachers are able to do their job.
Has it been improving?
Wow, good question. Minister Motshekga will say that tonight. We anticipate that she will say that the pass rate is on the rise. There have been murmurs that it's about at 80% right now. But we found that it's remaining quite stagnant if we look at what we call the throughput rate, which is the number of learners who were in grade 2 10 years ago and who have now made it past Matric. The throughput rate for 2018 was 39%. So 39% of learners who were in grade 2 passed Matric, as opposed to the 70-something that we often hear about. So in terms of whether there have certainly been improvements, but we're still really struggling. And we will continue to do so unless we confront what the challenges are, which is foundation phase learning.
All right, well, let's talk about that foundation phase, because I remember my daughter going into grade 000, and the Matric story really begins as far back as then.
we have a very strong approach to numeracy and literacy, all the way from the time they arrive at our school, grade quadruple naught, in fact.
Wow,
all the way through. And then we have a process by which we monitor and track individual performance by students and create intervention plans to make sure that any competencies that are lacking are addressed, and that sort of thing. We also, we look at pedagogy slightly differently. We have the capacity to do that. So on top of the normal traditional subjects, we have what we call development of global competencies. Right. We have the whole digital literacy aspect of it. And all of that, I think, just helps aid a better learner.
All right, so that foundation phase, I know you're quite passionate about that. And it seems as if you don't get that right foundation, that it's sometimes you can never catch up sometimes.
Right. So we have spoken for a number of years about the along with other education experts, about the importance of having a strong foundation. I was talking to you earlier about the Pearl study, which said that just under 80% of grade 4 learners who could not read for meaning. Which means that it often leads to learners then dropping out of the system even before they reach matric, because they are struggling throughout the course of their schooling career. And we know that there are about 50% of learners, just under 50% of learners that don't even make it to grade 12. Because, I mean, there are various challenges, but one of those challenges is that they don't feel equipped enough to be able to handle the system.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to refer to the continent, because a lot of countries are less resourced than South Africa, by far. And yet, academically, the kids are achieving. And I'm trying to understand why that might be. South Africa spends a higher percentage of its GDP on education than many of the countries across the continent. Where are we failing our kids?
I really believe that it is in teacher training. We have teachers coming out of the teacher training colleges, and a large amount of emphasis is placed on pedagogy and teaching styles. But what we're not seeing are an emphasis on the actual job that needs to be done, such as teaching science, teaching literacy, teaching numeracy. I don't think enough attention is given and detail is given to that.
I believe that historic backlogs, history and context definitely plays a role in how the system looks right now. After 1994, there had to be a huge revamp to try and equalize the system, right? So we've got learners that now have free access to education, and enrollments are really high at the beginning of schooling. So we've had to overcome a lot, and I believe that that's where that funding has also been geared towards. But issues around teacher support, those infrastructure backlogs that we've spoken about, have definitely have inhibit progress. And then,
Okay. All right, we're running out of time, but perhaps a final thought from both of you, because 2020, we're in the 20s now, and we want to, I suppose, big change now going forward. Private schools, maybe there's lessons to be learned there that we can convert into the public school system.
We need to relook the curriculum, which I think the Minister is doing. She's spoken about it. We need to understand the fourth industrial revolution and understand what those skills are that we need to equip in our students to make sure that they are strong participants in the new world or in today's world.
All right, and that big jump, where's it coming from?
I just want to say something about that money, that expenditure. Also, we're seeing a big shrinkage in education budgets. We've been seeing that for the last couple of years and into the future, into the next while. So that's concerning that we're seeing a shrink in budget, but we can park that in the public sector. But in terms of the big leap, one of the big interventions should definitely be around what happens in those early years. That's when we'll start seeing improvements. There's a study called the Early Grade Reading Study, which has piloted across, I believe, 2 provinces and a couple hundred schools in the lower quintiles, in public schools. And we're seeing positive results coming from that. So if we can focus on that, in earnest as a country. We can
I'm going to get into trouble, but I do have to ask this question because a lot of kids are very excited, they're passing their matric, but the jump between grade 12 and year 1 university seems to be enormous still, and I wonder, how do we close that gap? Let me start with you.
Conversations between what higher education is doing and what basic education is doing are really important. We have, for example, the University of Cape Town that have put together the national benchmark tests, and we have examiners and moderators in the basic education school group, and I don't think those two are talking. So the national benchmark tests were put together possibly because of little faith in the matric examination, right? But we need to have the two bodies speak to one another so that we can be confident in what each other is doing.
All right.
I completely agree. I had a thought that has just left my mind.
But there does seem to be that gap. We've known about it a long time, but there doesn't seem to be a closing of it. And I just worry that some kids, particularly in the rural schools, are going to come into Durban, into Johannesburg, Cape Town, and that jump is enormous. And I don't know what we can do to help it.
Okay. So we anticipate, and which is positive, even though it needs to be interrogated, increased bachelor's passes, which is always good news, you know, and that's what we do want to see, even though we need to interrogate those figures. But universities or higher education institutions should be able to support learners, should endeavor to support learners that are struggling, so that they also don't get left behind in those institutions. And you're right, the first couple of, it's very rare to find learners, particularly from the lower quintiles, being able to proceed through higher education in the allocated amount of time, never mind through the whole system. And there's a question of fees there, but
Do you know what, I get a sense we're going to have these conversations continually and not just once a year. But to both of you, thanks so much indeed for your insights. Congratulations, 100%, my goodness. And let's hope that our kids in the public school system will get the quality that's required to start creeping towards the 98, 99 percentiles. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're going to continue talking about education because, as you know, today the matric results will come out a little bit later on. Around about 6 o'clock, we're expecting Minister Angie Motshekga to share that number with us, and the provinces will be fighting and vying to see which percentage, which province is the first and did better this year. All of that's still to come. In the meantime, learners who are anxious about their results or those concerned that their loved ones might not be coping are advised to call the Social Department Command Centre hotline on the